Good morning, everyone. Barrett here, heading over to the shop again today. Today is actually going to be the first time I've ever vlogged anything for this kind of stuff, and I'm hoping to turn it into something kind of lucrative. We'll see how it goes. No one ever succeeded by not trying, right? But today we're going to take my buddy Ken's 2019 Volkswagen Golf R and going to put some Bilstein dynamic chassis control coilovers into the car. These actually bolt right up into the car, and they will work with the DCC control that comes factory on the new Golf Rs. This allows him to retain the functionality through the infotainment system, to go through eco, comfort, normal, and race modes to adjust the dampening. He doesn't have individual control to go underneath the car and have multiple forms of dampening, but this is actually a really good way to avoid any kind of check engine, or not check engine lights, but EPC lights, and it keeps you from having to buy the additional KW or iSweep DCC delete kits. It's actually a pretty cool system. I'm excited to try it out. I have the Bilstein PSS10 B16s on my car, and they're 10-way adjustable dampening, and I'm really interested to compare the two and see how they are. I've got mine set for daily driving at 5 clicks, and when I get on the highway where it's kind of bumpy and they have a lot of dips and stuff, I'll stiffen it up just to keep from having any kind of rubbing or anything. But I'm really excited to see how these work. I know he's excited to get these on, and we're gonna test it out and see how it goes. All right, here's today's victim, I guess, if you want to call it that. 2019 Golf R. These only come in one way now, fully loaded, dynamic chassis control, navigation. The updated facelift has all the infotainment system. It's a pretty dumbed down version of what the Audi is. It doesn't use Google Maps and stuff for the nav, but it's a really cool car. Completely stock. He's had it paint corrected and ceramic coated, and it is a gorgeous car. Beautiful car. We're gonna get tearing into it here in just a second. We've got it on the lift. Got to get a couple of things going before we're ready to go. Alright, cool. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove our axle bolt here from the spindle. To do that, we're going to hold our rotor in place with a screwdriver. We're going to place it right into here. And we're going to use a very large impact to take that off. Okay, now that we've got that, we're going to come here, leave the bolt in, because here in a little bit we're going to use a dead blow hammer to push this through and make the axle come out of the back. Before we go into that, we're going to come here and take off our sway bar end link here. We're going to come down underneath and remove our 3 knuckle bolts here, and then we'll remove the caliper as well. These are 16mm nuts here on the bottom. These out of the way. And then our sway bar end link is 18 mil. I'm going to be able to get a good angle on this. Sorry about that. Doesn't take much to take it out. And now, one thing with these vehicles that have dynamic chassis control, they have level sensors on the front of the vehicle. The easiest way that I'm going to do this, I'm just going to disconnect the little 10mm bolt here on the bottom of the control arm and move the arm out of the way. These are self-locking, so they're not going to turn off as easy. You're going to have to use the tool, back it off a while. Lift it up and out of the way. Okay, now that we have that, we're going to take off our brake calipers. These are going to be 21mm bolts. So we're going to have to get a breaker bar on this. Make sure that they're broken out of the way, and then we'll take them out the rest of the way. So we've used our breaker bar. We'll go over to a ratchet. Starts to kind of fight. If you hold up on the caliper, it'll give you a little leeway to move the bolt out a little easier. Now we have to remove this little 10mm bolt from this bracket here, and that way we're going to be able to disconnect our dynamic chassis control connector there, our ABS sensor and everything, move this bracket out of the way, and bring our entire caliper over and underneath the control arm, and we're going to tie it up right here and hold it up with some zip ties. Alright, now we have our brake out of the way. It was zip tied to our little control arm there. We're now going to come underneath and take our tie rod in bolt out here. I believe that is an 18 or a 19mm, but we'll confirm that here in just 1 second. And once we loosen that nut, we're going to have to use a pry bar to pry up on the control or on the tie rod here with our lower control arm, and then we're going to have to hit with a metal hammer on this side to loosen it. And while we hit it, we're going to pull down on that pry bar and lift it up, and it'll pop out. If we tried to use one of the forks that you see a lot of people use, you can tear these boots very easily, and we don't want to do that. It's a brand new car. Regardless if it's an old car, we wouldn't want to tear a boot anyways, because we're going to end up replacing the tie rod in. My apologies, this was actually a 21mm, so let's try to take that off. I'm just going to use my 1/2" breaker bar just to use that as a pry bar. And I'm pressing up on the tie rod, pushing it up to remove this out of the spindle, and we're using the axle as our kind of fulcrum brace point there. Okay, now we got that out of the way. You are going to kind of mar it up a little bit. Don't be afraid of that. It's just going to happen. It's impossible not to do it. We're going to move that out of the way now. And we're going to start hitting our axle out here. And we're going to pull down on our control arm to remove the axle from the back side of the spindle. We're going to use this bolt with a dead blow to start guiding our axle out. Doesn't take much to get it started. Keep backing it out. Try to push it in as far as you can. Take this bolt, move it to the side. Now we're going to take a breaker bar or something equivalent, push it into the hole here, and give it a couple taps here to try to loosen our axle out. Push it out as far as we can. We're going to pull down on the lower control arm. You guys got some. We're out of our lower control arm here. Pull. Lightly tap our axle back through. Our axle is completely free. Now we're going to lower the car down. We're going to take out the 3 13mm bolts that hold the top hat down. Drop everything out. Actually, before we do that, we're actually going to take off the brake caliper here, because we want this, or not the brake rotor off. The reason we want to do that is because it's very heavy. When we pull the suspension out, we just want it gone. We're going to need a T30 bit here to take off this set screw and pull the caliper or pull the rotor off. All right. Hold on to that screw because when you go to install the brakes later, it's going to make it a lot easier to hold it in place. Now we're ready to lower the car down, and we're going to pull the entire spindle assembly with the entire shock or strut and spring out with the top hat, and we'll start to remove all of this from the spindle and start getting our new Bilstein products in. Okay, now we've got the car back lowered. We're going to remove a small clip underneath here that holds our rain tray in. Remove this. We're going to move this little foam block out of the way and lift up on it. Now in the manuals they say not to lift it any more than 60 millimeters, which is going to be right, because if you go too high with it, then you're going to come up here and crease that. So what you want to use is, if you can use a 1/4 inch socket, or I'm sorry, a 1/4 inch ratchet with a 13 millimeter socket. If you can't get enough leverage on that, a 3/8 will work, but don't try to put anything larger than a 3/8 ratchet underneath here, because then you're going to have to really lift up on this and you don't want to bend that. Alright, here's what it looks like once we pull everything out. Our strut and spring assembly along with the spindle is completely out. And you may be wondering, why do they do that? There's other videos that show that we just take off the bolts from the axle here. Well, the reason I do this, and my buddy Ken that I'm working on a car with, he actually helped me out with this a long time ago and told me it's just easier to pull it out, because then you're not fighting with the axle on the inside. You're not trying to pull the spindle down to remove the strut out. And so I mean, it does make it so much easier to do it this way. It's a little bit, it looks like more work, but it's really not, because you end up saving a lot of time. When you try to do it the other way that a lot of videos have shown, it takes so much more time, it's a lot more effort. So this way is a lot easier. Now we have everything laid out on the ground here. We're going to take an impact and hit it here. Now, a lot of people think that you need a spring compressor on that. This spring is not under a lot of tension at all. You can use 21 millimeter with an impact on here, and I'll show you here in just a second. It'll come right off. You don't have anything to worry about. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and start to remove the strut from the spindle here. And we're going to need some triple squares. I believe it's a 14 millimeter on the side. I need to check. In just one second, I'll grab on my tools and we'll kind of get rolling on that. So on the spindle here, we're going to use a 14 millimeter triple square bit to hold the bolt. This is a 3/8 drive. This is just going to be to hold everything in place. Over here, I have an 18 millimeter nut. This out. Put this back on so we don't lose it. Push it out of the way. Now we're going to rotate our assembly over. We are going to use a strut spreader tool. This one is a 1/2 inch drive. Pretty sure there are others out there that aren't quite as big. So we're going to put this in here and we're going to give it a little bit of a turn. I don't want it to fully lock into place because I don't want it to damage any of the aluminum here. Just need to get a little tension on it from the gap. And have everything separated from there. I was saying earlier about how there's not a lot of tension on the spring, that you can just take everything off. Well, you're about to see it. Comes completely off, no issues at all. So this entire assembly here with our strut bearing and our top hat mount is going to be reused on our new dampener, or our new coilover system rather. We have bump stops here, and we're going to cut this collar off, and then we're going to cut the very first portion of this off, just to make sure that we don't have any kind of bottoming out and stuff. The car is going to be lower, there's going to be less travel. All right, now we've got our coilover assembly ready to go. We took our bump stop out of the factory assembly. We cut down the first collar on it. On these, they actually have a metal collar covered in rubber that takes up, basically it provides more rigidity to the bump stop, but we had to remove that to remove the first layer of the bump stop. Once we removed that, we went ahead and put it on to the strut rod, or the piston rod rather, and we've got our top hat back on, our sleeve on, and we've got our nut lightly kind of tightened down on here. We didn't use a spring compressor, I just pushed down on it while I had my buddy go ahead and start tightening this down. We've got our collar set here on the coilover as well. The set screws are set into it. Everything's ready to go on this. We just need to start tightening down our top hat bolt, or our top hat nut, and we'll go from there. For this, we're going to use, these are some Schwaben tools. It's a 22 millimeter, they pass through. With it, they have this cool little T-bar handle with a long extension, 7 millimeter Allen key. We're going to put our pass through on top. 7 millimeter Allen in. All right, so we're going to start torquing this down. It's a really cool set. Makes it really easy to install these for the front and the rear. He picked this tool set up specifically to do these coilovers, and I'm really glad that he did. It's going to make it a lot easier. Okay, after some little issues that we had there with the spindle, it wouldn't spread open enough with the tool that I have. We had to do some improvising and use a chisel to kind of push in here and open it up more. I believe the reason it was kind of giving us difficulty is because of so much paint that are actually on these coilovers. The tolerances are very tight, so we were able to get it, thankfully. Now we're going to go through, reinstall our pinch bolt and go ahead and put it back in the car. Alright, now I'm going to hold the spindle and all of our coilover assembly in place. Up here, Josh is going to put in the top three 13 millimeter top hat bolts. And the way this is going to orient, if you look at the top of your strut top hats, there's going to be a set of arrows that run to the front and the back of the vehicle. So you're going to turn those, and the little tab in the middle is going to go towards the engine bay. Alright, so we've got our spindle back in place, our strut back in place. We went ahead and took our sway bar end link, put it into the coilover, put the 18 millimeter on there, finger tight. We're going to come back, put our tie rod in. We're going to raise the car back up so we can get underneath, tighten up our 3 knuckle bolts here underneath, and we'll go ahead and put the brake caliper back on as well. Alright, cool. We're done with the fronts now. We're going to come back to the rear and start working on these. I'm going to come to the passenger side on this because there's a little bit more work that you need to do that's different from the driver side. But when it comes to actually taking out the strut, taking out the spring, disconnecting all of this, it's the same. The first one I'm going to go through is take a T25 and remove all the fender liner screws throughout here. Count them all once we're done. Now, this car is fairly new. When you're doing this, it's probably advisable to wear some safety glasses, keep from getting dirt in your eyes. Yeah, just kind of stand out of the fender. Try not to get too much under it. Okay, we got them all. The looks like we got a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 screws. And we're gonna start to pull this side out, and then this edge over here, you just lift up, drop it out over the caliper, move it out of the way. Now we need a 13 millimeter socket. You have to remove the gas tank evaporative system here. So there's one 13 millimeter bolt that holds it in here. You should remove that. You're just going to lift up on the canister and let it drop out of the way. And the reason we had to do that is because there are two 16 millimeter bolts that hold in our rear shock for the mounting point. So we're going to take those out here in just a minute. Okay, so underneath the car, we're going to go ahead and disconnect. This car has DCC, like I said earlier. We're going to disconnect that. Get this out of the way, out of the strut, or out of the shock rather. Here we're going to be a 13 millimeter bolt and nut. Here we've got 18 millimeter bolt and nut, and we're going to work our way from the inside out. I go ahead and put some kind of like exhaust jack or something like that underneath it to give it a little bit of tension relief here, because you don't want everything to just fall out. It makes it a little bit easier to remove the bolts and then let everything kind of fall down naturally. We're going to go ahead and take out the sway bar end link. Like I said, it's a 13 millimeter nut socket, or nut and bolt, right? And if we've got enough tension off of it, we should be able to get it through. Pull it out. If you don't have some kind of jack underneath like this, if you're working down on the ground, you can use a floor jack to make it pretty easy. Now we're going to take out the 18 millimeter here. We'll be able to pop that one through. Let it come out, we'll add a little more tension to it. Now on these, you've got a short bolt here, a long bolt, and obviously a completely different bolt from the sway bar end. So make sure that when you're doing this, the orientation is for the strut, or for the shock, it's going to be the longest bolt, and it's going to face to the rear, the nut to the rear. The shorter one is going to be to the outside spindle, and the nut is going to be towards the front of the vehicle. See if we can push this one through. Okay, now we got those out of the way. We're gonna now we're gonna release all the tension out of this. Slowly come down. And we got the tension out of that. I'm going to come up here and remove the two 16 millimeter bolts that hold our shock in place. Have all that out of the way. Spider-Man reflexes. Those are required. Alright, now I'm going to show you guys how to disassemble the top mounting. We're going to need to reuse this for our coilovers, and we're going to cut the bump stop down as well. Alright, so moving on to removing the rear mount, upper mount for the shock. You got a little plastic cap on here. We're going to pop that off. You can use like a little pry tool or something. I just got a little pick. Pull that out. And here we're going to have a 17, actually the factory one is a 16 millimeter. So we're going to use this Schwaben tool again. And then place a 16 millimeter on top like that. Inside of here is going to be a tool that will attach to the top of this. Now, if you don't have this tool, what you can do, it's a little bit crude, is you can take a multi-point 1/4 inch socket and you can hammer it onto here. But you're still going to need a pass-through wrench like this. So we'll place that on. Use our T-bar handle. Make sure it's nice and snug. Start taking it off. Shouldn't take a whole lot. Take off the nut. Remove the top mount. Now, we're going to have to reuse the factory bump stop on the inside of this. There's a small zip tie that holds it together. I'm going to cut that off. Remove the boot. And inside is going to be the bump stop. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut below the white ring into this right here and reuse this portion. All right, now that we're back over here, we're going to go ahead and remount our new shock. We're going to remount our canister. On the back side of the canister, you'll see there's a little arm you need to guide into a little bracket here. Push it against the wall, up, set your 13 millimeter bolt back in, lock that down. We'll remove our old spring. So we've got our new spring. Now the Bilsteins are pretty cool. They got color coordinated stuff. So the blue goes towards the spring, which is blue. Black is going to go back towards the body of the car. All right, so we're going to work from the inside out again. We're going to start with our sway bar inlay. Bolt goes in from front to back, and that the same goes out of the back here. And make sure we get enough tension on it. It's back in place. This makes it really easy to adjust. As you can see, it kind of moving up and down here. Just going to place this on here. We're going to go to our shock. There we go. Now remember, this is going to be the long bolt. The bolt goes in same orientation as the sway bar inlay, front to back. That. a shorter one. Kind of out of alignment here. Times with the dead blow. Look on the other side, we're not in correctly, so we need to add a little more tension. Bring up this side. Get there. Before we let all the tension out, we're going to let some of it out. Not all the way though, I want to get these torqued down before. Working from inside out. Alright, now that we have all the bolts tightened up, we're going to release the tension completely from the lower control arm. Now we can begin to reinstall our fender liner. Now there's a breathe tube here. Actually, this is a drip tube for any gas that you may spill on the outside of the filler cap. We want to make sure that that's behind our fender liner. Lift up. Remember to put this front edge inside of the plastic piece here.
Well, I had those building stuff up on the computer. They're so really nice.
We use our T25, put our 9 torque screws back in.
I could put an 18x9 on there.
Alright, everything's wrapped up, ready to go. This is fresh off of the lift. We already did a preliminary kind of check on everything, and the fronts are definitely higher than the rears. We're going to let the car drive for a couple of days and let it settle, come back in about 48 hours and recheck everything and pull the wheels off and adjust the height to where it needs to be, for just kind of guessing of where they needed to be. It's really not that bad. The rears are definitely lower than the front, but these cars, if you have the front and the rear the same height, the rear is always going to look lower. That's just how they are. That's why a lot of the companies that sell springs, they have little pucks that go in the rear to raise the rear end up just a little bit. So we were looking at my car, and we've got 25¼ on the front, both sides, from the bottom of the ground to the center of the fender, and the rears are 25 9/16. So we're going to try to replicate that with this vehicle. We're probably just going to go to 25½ in the front and 25¾ in the rear, just to keep it a little bit higher. I think mine are a little too low for the front because I do get some rubbing every once in a while. But overall, it wasn't bad. It did take a little longer than what I expected today with filming and everything, and the Bilsteins were a little difficult to get into the spindle with all the paint on them. A lot more difficult than what the factory ones are to get back in, or any other ones that have a stainless steel or just a metal strut body. They're a lot easier to get in. I have noticed that the ones that I've done in the past that are painted, they are typically a little bit harder to do, but So we got a couple R's here just to give you guys a rundown of what we got. It's my buddy Kim's 19R there. We were working on today. It's my white, Oryx White 2018 Golf R. All kind of stuff done on that. I want to do a breakdown of that vehicle one day. I got pretty lucky with that one. And this is my buddy Josh's 2016 base model Golf R. He's got the stock wheels and stuff on it right now, but he's got a set of old Sparko wheels that I sold to someone, and then he bought them off of them. Rides around with some R888s on it, and typically, but he put these on with some of the rain and stuff we get in those R888s. They wear out really quick, but his vehicle we use for a lot of the development stuff with integrated engineering, getting the ECU tuning running, and that car has actually gone 11.4, I think it went 11.49 in the quarter with race fuel. We went 11.46 in the quarter on 93 octane. Did have a lot of weight reduction and stuff done with that. Best time that I've gotten with my car so far on a lower boost setting with a stock DSG file, we ran 11.74 at 115 last weekend at Fix Fest in Bradenton, Florida. Pretty impressed with that. Full weight, not bad on 93 octane. So get a good shot of the cars here. That's all I've got for today. Until next time, guys, see ya.